David small in stature and Goliath, a giant, locked eyes. David was unafraid because he believed the Lord had prepared him for this moment. Goliath laughed at the small boy, saying, "Who is this boy that thinks he can beat the giant warrior who has defeated many great and skilled soldiers?" The Philistines stood on one side of a mountain, and King Saul and the Israelites stood on the other, with the valley of Elah dividing them. Each side was to select a champion. The Philistines selected Goliath, with a giant stature of 9 feet 9 inches. He wore a bronze helmet on his head. His massive upper body was armed with a coat of mail, which had a weight of 126 pounds, and the armour that covered his legs was made of bronze. Between his shoulders he carried a bronze javelin, that the spearhead was made of iron and weighed 16 pounds. The giant stood taunting the armies of Israel. His booming voice cried out to them, "Why have your armies lined up for battle? Am I not the champion for the Philistines? Choose a man for yourselves to come down and fight me, and if he is able to kill me, then we shall be your servants. But if I succeed and kill your man, then you shall be our servants and serve us." Goliath continued, bellowing out, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." He was a man full of pride, having won many battles and knowing that men feared him. King Saul and all Israel, hearing Goliath's words, cowered in fear. There was not one soldier in all the king's army brave enough to fight Goliath. They believed it a fool's errand. So, the army of Israel would go out and battle the Philistines every day, and every day Goliath would taunt them for a champion to fight and put an end to the war. Days turned into weeks, and Goliath's taunts became a bitter routine. Every morning, the giant would appear, his booming voice mocking the Israelites, his presence a dark cloud over their morale. On one particular day, a young shepherd boy named David, who was the youngest of Jesse's 8 boys, was in the camp of King Saul. He was sent there by his father to deliver food to his 3 eldest brothers who fought for the king. Jesse had told David, "Take this food to your brothers and see how they fare and bring back word as to their well-being." When David arrived at the camp, he gave the food to the supply keeper and ran over and greeted his brothers. While visiting with them, he heard the thundering voice of the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines, chanting his taunting words, searching for a man brave enough to be Israel's champion. And when the men of Israel saw him, they fled away from him in dreadful fear. David listened intently. The injustice burned in his heart. Just then, he overheard some men talk about the rewards of the king that would be bestowed upon the person brave enough to fight the giant. They said that the one brave enough to kill the Philistine man, the king would enrich him with great riches, give the hand of his daughter, and give his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. So David, angered at Goliath's taunts, asked the men standing by him, "Is this true, what those men say about the rewards of the king for a champion? For why should the armies of the living God tremble before this uncircumcised Philistine?" And the men answered him, "Yes, it is true." David's oldest brother, Eliab, was angered at David's statement about the giant. He felt David insulted the king's army with his words. He started teasing David and said, "Why are you here? Don't you have a few sheep to tend to somewhere? Did you come down here just to gawk at the battle like some starry-eyed child?" And David, being annoyed with Eliab's teasing, answered him in a firm voice and said, "What have I done now? Isn't there a reason I am here?" Then he turned to some other people standing nearby and asked them the same question, and they answered him with the same answer. Some of the men, hearing what David was asking and saying about the giant, went and told the king. So King Saul sent for David. When David met with the king, he told him in a very assured and unafraid tone of voice, "We should not be afraid of this Philistine man. I, your servant, will go and fight him." And Saul, looking at him, answered, "You are too young, and he is a man of war from his youth." But David, unmoved, said to Saul, "Your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them." seeing that he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, "The Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." And Saul, seeing David's faith and boldness, said to him, "Go, and the Lord be with you." So Saul took David to be clothed with his armour. David put on the bronze helmet and put on the coat of mail. He fastened his sword to the armour, and then tried walking with all the heavy armour on. He struggled with the weight and constriction of all the metal on him. He found it to be cumbersome, and it made him slow. Being frustrated, he turned to Saul and said, "I have never worn armour before. I cannot walk or move with all this on." And so he took it all off. David put his staff in his hand and went down to the brook and gathered 5 smooth stones, and he put them in a pouch. He armed himself with his sling. He was extremely accurate and highly skilled with this weapon. He had used it many years to kill large prey. He then went over to find the giant man. Goliath, spotting David walking in his direction, turned and started walking towards David. When he got closer and he saw David, he was disgusted because he was a good-looking young man. Goliath's voice boomed, "Am I a dog that you come to me with the sticks?" And he cursed David by his gods. His voice filled with anger, he said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." David looked at him intently, a fierceness in his eyes. He said firmly to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with the sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." Just then the giant came at David, and in all one motion David came running at Goliath. He put his hand in his bag, drew out a stone, put it in his sling, and hurled it at the giant man, striking him right in the middle of his forehead, the stone sinking deep. The giant fell to the ground on his face, dead. David, then having no sword, ran over and took Goliath's sword out of his sheath, stood over him and cut his head off with it. The Philistines, seeing what had just happened to their champion, with a tremendous amount of fear and chaos, fled. The army of King Saul then arose, shouted and pursued the fleeing men. They chased after them, killing and wounding them for a long way, before turning back, resounding in a huge victory. They then plundered the tents of the Philistines. David became an instant hero. He carried Goliath's head as a trophy and wore his armour, even though it was too heavy for him. He continued to distinguish himself in battle, leading Saul's armies to numerous victories. He gained more loyalty from the people, and even won the affection of Saul's daughter, Michal, who with Saul's approval he married. David's life after his victory over Goliath is a story of dramatic twists and turns, filled with adversity, overcome, and ultimate triumph. He became a symbol of courage, resourcefulness, and faith, and his legacy continues to inspire generations. So there it is, the story of David and Goliath. Do you think this was an unfair fight? The advantage being the faith of David, and not the size, talents, and pride of Goliath. Let me know what you think of this story in the comments below, and if there is any other Bible story you are interested in knowing about. Also, if you enjoyed this content, then please hit that like and subscribe button, and enable that bell notification so you can always be sure to follow me for a lot more crime-filled stories from the Bible. See you in the next sinful story. Thanks for watching.